My name is Gwen Olsen, and I'm a former pharmaceutical rep and author of the book Confessions of an RX Drug Pusher, God's Call to Loving Arms. And I spent 15 years in the pharmaceutical industry, and as part of my profession sold psychiatric drugs. And one of the categories of drugs that I never sold but became very familiar with over the years was the anxiolytics. And anxiolytics are the newer benzodiazepines. In fact, the term anxiolytic was coined by the industry because benzodiazepines started to get a very bad reputation for being highly addicting. In fact, we had a whole generation of housewives in the 1970s that were addicted to Valium, and so they were trying to come up with a new term for these drugs that was a little more friendly. We weren't causing addiction, we're relieving anxiety, so they coined the term anxiolytic, and they started promoting their new drugs such as Xanax and Ativan and Halcyon, which was a sleep aid that was also a short-acting benzodiazepine. They started promoting these as anxiolytics that were non-addicting benzodiazepines. Well, needless to say, I was prescribed Xanax, and for a number of reasons, because Xanax was extremely popular. It was detailed quite a bit, and there were tons of samples that were left for physicians because they literally would fall off of the shelves when the drugs first came out. There were so many samples that were left. And over a period of time, I started to realize that, gee, when I didn't take my Xanax, I started to feel a panicky kind of feeling that I actually hadn't felt prior to taking Xanax. I had only had a little anxiety that I needed to relieve, and the symptoms started to be more severe. So I thought it was because of the stress and the pressure that I was under at work, and so I started to increase the dosage of my anxiolytic, of my Xanax. And long story short, off and on for a 10-year period, I was addicted to Xanax. And the only way that I really found out that I was addicted and identified it as addiction was that when I became pregnant with my son in 1988, as a good pharmaceutical rep, I knew that I shouldn't take a Category D pregnancy drug, which meant that it was teratogenic. It had proven to be, it would cause birth defects in animals, so therefore it had the potential to cause birth defects in humans. So I just cold turkey went off of the drug. And that is something that you do not ever want to do. You never discontinue any psychiatric drug cold turkey, because I put myself in an absolute tailspin. Because what happens is anytime you take a psychiatric drug long term, it will chemically alter the pathology of your brain chemistry. So if you immediately withdraw the drug, then you will have all of these compensatory actions that take place in the brain chemistry to try to rectify, and it can have some very serious withdrawal effects. In fact, I was so severely reacting to the withdrawal that I wasn't able to work, I wasn't able to function, I wasn't able to do anything. I was a psychological, emotional, and physical basket case for almost 6 months, and I never dreamed that it would take that long for me to withdraw from the drug. But it's imperative that people recognize that all of the psychiatric categories of drugs are highly addicting, and that when you withdraw these products, the symptoms that you experience in withdrawal can sometimes be 10 times as severe as they were before you started taking the drug. So the really important thing to recognize on any of these psychiatric drugs is that once you start to exacerbate these withdrawal symptoms, if you tell your physician about it, they will very often, particularly a psychiatrist, they will tell you that you were having rebound depression or rebound anxiety or rebound psychosis, and they will insist that you go back on your drugs and sometimes even increase the dosage of your drugs because they say that you're never going to be normal again without your drugs. When in fact what you're doing is your body is trying to detoxify from the drugs, and the symptoms that you're experiencing are discontinuation syndrome, and that is actually the nice term that the pharmaceutical uses for withdrawal. Again, they don't want to concern people and make people think that they're addicting them to drugs and that they're going to have severe withdrawal reactions. But in fact, that is what happens on every category of psychiatric drug if it's withdrawn cold turkey, and sometimes even when they're withdrawn by tapering. So the one thing that I do want to be sure and mention, because it's very important that people not try to withdraw themselves from psychiatric drugs, particularly antidepressants, antipsychotic drugs, anxiolytics, because there can be some very severe repercussions in doing so, that anyone listening to this should consult with their medical doctor and not do this by themselves, and make sure that if they do decide to try some natural supplement or another alternative means of treatment, that they inform their physician and that they taper off of their drugs under the supervision of a doctor before trying to control their symptoms by natural means. Well, it's often difficult to get the cooperation of a psychiatrist in order to get off of your drugs. So what I tell people to do, encourage people to do, is to find an alternative care MD. Very frequently, it'll be the person that builds themselves as an integrative care MD who will be more amenable to helping you withdraw from your drugs safely, and also in getting you stabilized on some sort of a nutritional supplement or some other means of therapy. If you go to a regular psychiatrist, they very often will tell you that you will never be normal again without drugs, and they do not endorse alternative means of treatment, primarily because psychiatry has a vested interest in having people take the drugs, because they personally do not do therapy these days. They leave that up to the psychologist. Only old school psychiatrists do any kind of therapy. So in fact, if they don't encourage you to take the drugs, they have no way of treating you, because that's pretty much all that psychiatry has in their armamentarium. So it is imperative that you seek out an alternative care MD that can supervise your withdrawal of your drugs, and also supervise and give you good information and education about any kind of nutritional supplements or herbs that you intend to take.